I think having the balance of co-op not only helps to break up the work, but also test out what might I like to do. But then unfortunately, as you know, I took the role and the pandemic hit. So yeah, I know. All the dreams of traveling just went out the door. That's like a challenge being in tech and looking like you're 25 years old. It felt like it was hard to gain credibility because you're so young. And I clearly didn't have the experience of my colleagues. Like a 23-year-old when I first took the role, like that's really tough to just walk into that role and be a trusted advisor when you have no background in that field.
All right. Well, welcome to the show, Heather. Thank you for joining us on Sympa Says.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
So I'm going to take you back to when you were a kid. Well, maybe more when you were a teenager. Tell me, with your career, what were you thinking you wanted to do? When you first started thinking about what do I do with my life? What's my career want to look like?
Okay, we're going way back then.
We're going back.
I honestly think I was one of the kids who just changed my mind every other week. I learn about something new. Think, oh, that sounds pretty cool. I want to do that. Like the earliest memory I have of wanting to do a specific job was in maybe grade 4. And I think we learned about a firefighter came to talk to our class and I was like, I want to do that. And I'm like, I'm scared of everything. I could never be a firefighter. Like there's absolutely no way. But it was things like that, when I was really into the sciences when I was kind of in elementary school and in high school. At one point, I remember really wanting to be like an astronomer, and I don't know, but I didn't really think about what these jobs look like. I just thought about, I would learn the topic and say, hey, that's kind of cool, and just keep following it that way. And I honestly felt like it was a combination of someone I had met or what we were learning in school. And if I happened to like that, that's what I wanted to do at that moment. And honestly, I still feel like that's part of my personality and maybe part of I'm interested in so many different things. And I actually do feel like in a way that's what brought me to engineering. And I don't know if that's kind of getting into the next phase of my life. But I think because I had so many ideas of what I might want to do, I looked at all these different degrees and I was kind of like, okay, I'm interested in biology. I love biology, but do I want to do a whole degree on that? I didn't think so. So I was like, going into any of the specific sciences seemed like I was too locked into something. At least that was my perception. Maybe that's not true. But then I was kind of told to, do you want job security or at least have, good prospects at the end of your degree? And I thought that sounds like probably a responsible decision to make. And I had decent grades. Math was never my best subject, I realized too, but I was not bad at it. I just preferred like the sciences and I preferred writing, which is not a skill set most engineers have, or I shouldn't say that. Most engineers don't like writing, at least in my experience. So maybe it was a bit of a weird fit, but I kind of thought it'll leave all the doors open. And I think that's how I ended up choosing engineering, was just because it seemed like so versatile and open-ended.
And I'm just looking at your LinkedIn profile. But you've gone to so many different universities. It's hard.
No, only two.
Only two. So I'm in the wrong spot, I'm guessing. I'm in your experience. So what was the name of the university that you went to and the degree you actually did in the end?
Yeah, I went to Dalhousie University, which is in Halifax in the east coast of Canada, and I did industrial engineering. And so I'm from Southern Ontario, which is like, I'm from 2 hours away from Toronto. So kind of where most people in Canada live. And I think I just wanted a different experience that was in line with, wanting to pursue different careers or learn different things. I also wanted to see new places. I feel like the prospect of leaving Canada didn't seem like an option to me. And it's interesting because I think that depends a lot on the school you go to and the people around you. I don't know anybody who went to school abroad. And then I learned later that was a thing you could do. And I just never even thought about it. I don't know if my parents would have been a big fan of that either. So it's probably for the best. Yeah. But I ended up saying, okay, my grandfather had gone to Dalhousie, which I actually didn't really know until I got in there. Actually. And he did engineering there as well. So it's kind of,
oh, wow.
Kind of cool. Apparently both of my grandfathers were engineers, which I didn't even realize until I was applying for engineering because I didn't really have a concept of what adults did in their lives. But I ended up applying to a few schools, but I liked Halifax. We had visited, when I was a bit older, and I knew I had a bunch of extended family out there, and I didn't know them super well, but it kind of was reassuring to me if I'm moving if you drive, it's like a 20-hour drive. It's about a 2.5-hour flight from Toronto. And so I thought, if I'm going that far as like a 17, 18-year-old, at least I have family members that could potentially help me if I need help. And it was true. Like they were fantastic. So that was part of my decision to go to DAL. And then to go specifically into industrial engineering is a choice that you make after your first year. So some schools, even in Canada, not all schools operate that way, but a lot of them do in engineering. You go into general engineering for your first year. So you take like the calculus, mechanics, physics, just kind of like the base courses. And then you choose kind of which discipline you want to go into after your first year. So I went in thinking mechanical engineering because I had an interest in mostly from sports and like biomedical kind of applications, and thought maybe that's the path that I'll go. But I'm, again, not sure, because I liked that when I learned it, but will I still like it later? I don't know. And I took one mechanics course and was like, yeah, I'm out. I'm not doing this for another 3-4 years.
You did well.
So,
you did well. I was going to say, I think I did. I tried to do calculus in my final year of high school. Lasted about half a term, and I said, "Nah, this is not for me. I don't need to do this. I'm dropping out of this." So,
wait, what is your degree in?
Sort of business computing. That's what it was.
Okay.
Victoria University. Yay! Hey VU, love you. That was like a whopping, not even 10 minutes from my house. So I didn't have to go very far. Used to ride my bike to uni. Okay, so, and I forgot to mention to the audience that the role you currently have, and we'll get into how you got there and how you got into like your initial role at Microsoft a little bit later on, is currently a technical specialist in data and AI at Microsoft, and it is your second time at Microsoft. So what are and sport's a big part of your life as well. I know that you do a lot of coaching and you did a lot of sport at uni. So tell me, what do you think, and what outside of university, and we'll get into how you got into Microsoft in the first place from university, but what are the skills, and was there anything you did at uni or at high school that you worked that you felt gave you some of the skill areas and the skill sets, including, from what I can see, it looks like you had what's listed as co-op, but I'm guessing it's sort of like an internship at a number of different companies. So take me through that, and then gain the skill sets before you had, I guess most people would say, a real job, like a full-time job.
Yeah. So I did do a co-op program. So like same as internship, co-op, same thing. So we had 3 opportunities to take different terms for 4-month internships, essentially, over a 5-year course. They were kind of factored into our degree, and we would do, I think they started in my 3rd year, and then we kind of rotate between being in school and being on co-op, which was really nice too, just kind of to have the break of being in school, studying 24/7 and having no time, and then getting to go to work and kind of have a different experience. I think that honestly helped make it through the degree. Because I will say, like, I don't like the notion of, engineers are smarter than everyone. I don't think that's true. But I do think it's a challenging degree just in terms of workload. Like, they just throw so much work at you. I look back and I'm like, I don't know how I did it. I don't think I would be able to do it again. It's just so much work. So I think having the balance of co-op not only helps to break up the work, but also test out what might I like to do. So I did... basically, the school would provide some postings. You could find your own job as well, but I didn't really have a lot of connections. So I went through the postings at school, and I got my first co-op at Pratt & Whitney, which is an aircraft engine manufacturer. And it was kind of cool. Like, it was more of working in manufacturing is a pretty traditional job for an industrial engineer, because industrial engineering really stemmed from manufacturing processes and working more efficiently and kind of reducing waste and optimizing things is essentially what an industrial engineer does. Now, it's kind of evolved a lot in modern times. Not to say manufacturing doesn't exist. Obviously, it does. And there's still a ton of people, including industrial engineers, working in those industries. But manufacturing was where a lot of traditional jobs still are. And in that job, though, I wasn't necessarily doing industrial engineering. I was looking at like the training program and training certification they had, and then a little bit of process improvement things. So it was kind of good exposure to how does a company operate? Like, I had no real experience doing anything other than a karate instructor growing up. Oh, I think the office lights turned out. But so I think the first experience was good just to see how does a company operate. Had a great supervisor and learned a lot about, we're making products. We're making aircraft casings and the blades for the fans and the engine. So you're doing pretty, like, these are very specialized people and machinists working on these things, and they all have a very specialized skill to be able to do that. And so the shop floor was, crazy, full of all sorts of crazy equipment, and it was a cool experience to work in that environment. And then my second co-op was at BlackBerry. So that was kind of my first exposure to the tech world. Yeah.
Okay. There's a blast from the past. Yeah, because they were in Toronto, weren't they, or outside of Toronto?
They're Waterloo, which is about an hour from Toronto, and about an hour from where I grew up as well.
Yeah.
So that was interesting. I won't even get into what my job was there because I don't even know what I did. I think my title was business analyst, and I kind of was looking at some process improvements. But honestly, that was my first exposure into the world of tech and how chaotic it can be, because I was there in 2015, so it was kind of past their peak, right? And it was not a great time for BlackBerry. There was lots of layoffs happening. There was lots of consolidation happening. In the 4 months I was there, their last manufacturing facility in Cambridge, Ontario closed. So I initially started at that facility, was moved to the other facility in downtown Waterloo, or just outside of downtown Waterloo. And then they were closing one of their office buildings. Like, they had Rim Park, which was their initial where they had their offices. They were closing one of those and moving people into one building. A bunch of people that I had worked with were laid off during that time. And also we got to see, town halls for the first time, of people flying in to come participate in these town halls. And, there was some crazy marketing presentations. And I was there when they launched I think it was the last phone they ever launched. I'm not actually sure. The Priv. So I was there when that was released. And so honestly, I think it was a little bit scary to see people kind of being laid off, but at the same time, like, things were moving quickly, and the marketing teams were pushing these new products, and you're working in this company where it's very consumer facing and everybody knows BlackBerry. And so there was something about that experience that kind of appealed to me, even though the job itself wasn't necessarily what I'd want to do, but it was like something, things are happening here, whether they're good or bad. And just being at such a public company was kind of cool, because Pratt & Whitney is a more traditional job.
Got it. And so it was essentially almost like the first, even though from the sounds of it, it was quite chaotic. It was interesting going to a well-known brand or a well-known company and then working in there.
Exactly.
A bit traumatic, the experience, seeing a lot of, and it's never a good thing seeing layoffs or anything like that. It's quite an emotional thing for people who go through it. But
it was shocking, right? Because you don't really see that kind of stuff happen. Not mass layoffs in a manufacturing facility. It doesn't.
You certainly wouldn't
happen.
Hope for something like that in one of your first placements at a company.
Yeah. So that was it was an experience, and they had a co-op program with a bunch of other students there. So that was kind of cool too, because you meet lots of other people from different places coming to do their co-ops there. And then my last co-op, I remember I really wanted this one specific co-op job, and I honestly at this point couldn't even tell you what it was, but I remember being really upset that I didn't get it. And
really?
And we had this matching process at the time. So you do a bunch of interviews, then you'd kind of rank your employers, and they'd rank you back, and then you'd see the results at the end. And so I ended up, I think I didn't get my first choice, but I had matched with my second choice. And so I kind of thought, okay, well, I had one other offer, but I would have had to move to rural Nova Scotia, and I didn't really want to do that. I wanted to enjoy my summer in Halifax. And so I took the job at a company, Power Utility in Nova Scotia Power, and actually really, really liked it, primarily because I had an amazing manager. She was so fantastic, and I was working in a group called Work Plan Management. So trying to anticipate the needs and how do we allocate, specifically the project I worked on was how do we allocate power line technicians more effectively to kind of save costs, but also make sure we're doing it proactively and making sure we're, prioritizing safety. And so safety is a huge part of, engineering, and trying to make sure that these people are always safe and they're not overworked, and that we have enough people to maintain the infrastructure. And so that was the team that I worked on there, and I ended up staying on part-time with them and did a lot of forecasting and modeling, got to apply a lot of the things that I had learned in school. And so that was cool, because that was kind of the first job I had where I first of all, had more experience from school, had some cool, real projects in school. So I felt like I had more skills and experience to actually do something, whereas the first two were maybe a bit more of a struggle. And so that was really where I kind of got interested more in analytics And that experience also encouraged me I took a machine learning course in my last year of school when I came back, which was outside of our scope. We don't get a lot of electives in engineering. And so I prioritized taking a machine learning course because I was super interested to learn more about how could I take this a step further and do even better than the basic forecasting models that I had learned about in my other classes.
So do you think that was primarily where it started tweaking in your head, okay, this is what I probably want to do? Because for those listening, as I said, Heather's essentially a data specialist. So that's where her career path has led, many twists and turns in her career, in a short career so far, but a very, very interesting career. So do you think that was like the first moment that you thought to yourself, okay, this is something I think I can do? And then after you answer that, we'll get into Microsoft and how you got into that.
I would say that's fair, because that was the first time I'm like, oh, I kind of like working with data, and I liked how we could, make decisions based on the things that we were able to look at and apply it to something real. And so I ended up taking on a side project because I met somebody who was in HR, and she told me, okay, we're trying to kind of look at workforce planning. And it was a well-known issue that they were anticipating a bunch of people to retire at the same time. And how were they going to kind of replenish that workforce and manage it? And so she was like, we just acquired a new company and I got all this data on retirement patterns, but I haven't done stats in, years. Like, is that something that you do in your degree? And I said, yeah, for sure. So I took the data and kind of just did some statistical analyses on it to show different patterns. And it's just in Excel, right? Because that's all I knew at the time. I watched a bunch of videos on, we did a VBA and writing macros. That was like most of my degree was doing everything in Excel macros. And so that was what I knew to do. And I watched all these videos to like learn even more. But that, whatever, stats is stats. And so I was able to show like, different patterns, and I wasn't really providing recommendations, as a co-op student, but just showing like a breakdown of this is what is seen in the trends and breaking it down by gender or by location or different age groups. And she was like, oh, this is amazing. And I thought this was kind of fun, and I didn't know people were like so impressed by this kind of thing, because we did stuff like that in class, and I kind of just thought that everyone knew that, because I feel like that's how you think too, is, oh, but this has to be, everyone must know how to do this because I'm just a student. And then I thought, maybe I'm actually kind of good at this stuff. Maybe this is like the thing that I should pursue.
That's cool. I like that story. I think everyone thinks like that, right? Everyone thinks, everyone knows that, right? Surely everybody knows that. That's a cool story. So, lots of interesting experiences you had there at a few of the different companies, including that last one, which sounds like it had a really, really decent impact on your career choice.
Yeah.
So now for those who don't know or aren't looking at Heather's profile, Heather got into what we call, correct me if I'm wrong here, mate, essentially it's an internship program. I think we call it a MAC program at Microsoft back then.
It's been renamed, and it's not our internship program. It's the new graduate program. So it was called MOC or MAC, depending on who you ask, Microsoft Academy of College Hires, but it got renamed to Aspire at some point in the last 5 years.
Well, that makes sense. I've heard that.
Yeah. So I came on board to the now Aspire program.
Okay. So how did that come about? Did you see something online? Did the university say, hey, here's an opportunity for our graduates to apply for? And then, so tell us how it came about, and just run through what typically, because if people are listening to this and they're currently at university or college, no matter where you are in the world as well, it's that people get hired all across the world at Microsoft. So there's lots of opportunities. So I think lots of people would be very interested to hear sort of the process that you went through.
I honestly hate telling the story because I feel like it was a lot of luck, and it's not, I wouldn't even recommend it as an approach. Like, I don't even know how it worked out, to be honest. And that's not me saying, oh, I didn't deserve it. It's like, I can't believe that worked out. I think getting the interview was what is the hardest part, is getting the interview. But what I did, this is how I approached getting a job. I started kind of panicking. So I started my 5th year of school, which in our program was the last year because of co-op. And in September, I was like, what am I going to do with my life? Because I was so focused on doing school, and I thought during one of my co-ops, I'm just going to figure it out. It's just going to click. I'm going to know exactly what I want to do. And it's just going to be so easy. And then I'll just go do that. And that isn't really what happened. Like there was things that I liked, but I didn't really know how that would still translate to a job or what company I wanted to work for. So I knew a few things about what I didn't want. Like I didn't want to work in a manufacturing plant because I like seeing daylight. I felt it was very cool. Some aspects of it, what we were building was really cool, but you're in a plant all day. And I was like, I don't want to have that. I want to deal with that. So I kind of had ruled out those kinds of jobs, but I still didn't really know. And so I kind of would sit down every Sunday for a couple of hours and I would just look through different job boards, look at job postings, look at what companies hired interns or had a new graduate program. And I was tailoring my cover letters and resumes, but probably not that much. And like was just applying. It was taking the brute force approach. To be fair, the job market was very different at that time, and maybe you could get away with that more. I think, unfortunately, it's not like that today. So I got rejected from tons of stuff, like the auto rejections, obviously. You don't hear back from a bunch. I ended up going through the interview process at Pepsi, but I kind of decided, I would have had to move to Ontario to like a smaller place. It was also more of a manufacturing type job. And I kind of decided I didn't really see myself in that career. It didn't seem like something that resonated with me. So I ended up not, going forward with that. And then I just was kind of waiting it out for a while. I think I had an interview with Deloitte, which is like a big consulting company, didn't get the job. And so time's ticking by, I'm still in school and I'm thinking, I don't know what I'm going to do. And at some point in that process, I had applied to Microsoft. I saw they had a new graduate program. I filled out the information and applied. And so at this point, it was probably September, of that year. Then I get an email in February, months later, from a Microsoft recruiter. And I'm like, all right, what is this spam? And I'm looking at it. And I almost just deleted it. And then I was like, wait a second, I did apply to Microsoft. And then I'm looking up the recruiter and I'm like, I find her LinkedIn profile. I guess that could be fake, but I also think that was less common back then to have the fake LinkedIn profiles. And so I find her LinkedIn profile and she was active. People commented on her thing. So I'm like, she seems legit. I think this is a legit email. So I responded to it and then no answer. So I thought, okay, well, whatever. A week later, I just said, hey, just following up. Like, I'd love to schedule the interview because it was an invitation to a screening interview. And then I thought, yeah, I'm never going to hear from that ever again, but worth a shot. And she answered me like immediately and was like, oh, I'm sorry. I missed your other email. Thanks. I'm glad you followed up and let's schedule your screening interview. I was like, okay.
That is cool.
So I Googled what they ask you in screening interviews at Microsoft, and the job was like super vague, like cloud technology something. To be quite honest with you, I knew nothing about the cloud. Nothing.
Yeah.
So I Googled basic stuff. I'm looking on online threads. I've jotted down some answers and I somehow passed the screening interview. I think they asked me how'd you explain the cloud to your grandmother or something? And I don't know, I guess I managed to answer it acceptably. And I can't even remember. I think they only asked me a couple of questions. And then they said, okay, yeah. The next day invited me to come out to the Canadian headquarters, which I was in just outside of Toronto at the time. And they flew me out, I think it was 2 weeks later or something, for an in-person interview. And I was given a case study. So I can't remember exactly what the case study was, but I was expected to prepare a presentation on it and showed up at the office to do that. And it was just one person. It was the guy who ended up being my manager for a bit, Jim, who is amazing, and someone from HR. That was it. There's only 2 people in the room. And I gave the case study presentation. And I honestly think the statement that got me the job was, at one point, I was presenting on some sort of technology that, of course, I learned about 2 days before or 3 days before, because had never heard of it. So I'm just Googling, looking at documents, seeing what is this thing. And he asked me a question about it. So he asked me something like, what is the mechanism in which it's able to do whatever the heck it was? It's something related to storage. And obviously, he knew I had no idea. And I didn't know. And I looked at him and I said, that's a great question. Let me get back to you on that. I'm going to go get some information from our team and I'll follow up. And he smiled and was like, okay, sounds good. And I actually think that's what got me the job. As I paused for a second and I was like, there's no way he expects me to know this.
No.
So he's just seeing if I'm going to lie.
Yeah, true. So there's a lesson for you all kids. All right, don't lie. Just say, "Good, that's a great question. Let me get back to you." Like we tell trainers that all the time. Like, just
Yeah.
good question. Don't know. Let me find out. Let's
Yeah.
learn it all. Great. Oh, that's a really cool
Exactly.
story.
So, and I think that was it. And then the interview was super casual. Like, it was shocking compared to any
Mm,
interview I had done for co-ops or any other jobs. Super casual. Like, they were just chatting
okay.
after that presentation. I don't remember. And then they called me the next day and offered the job. And it was like Azure technology specialist based in Toronto. And so, yeah, that was
Yeah,
that. I
and
had no idea what that meant, and I accepted it.
and you're at Microsoft. That's
Yeah.
cool. That's cool. So if we just go through your first stint at Microsoft, let's say you're a technology solutions professional in the Azure data platform, and then move to a cloud solution architect, the same in the data platform, and then you joined this pretty cool team where you met me, of course. Yeah.
Yep.
Clearly the highlight of your career,
Yes,
where you
highlight for
became
sure.
an Azure technical trainer. So all three very different roles for different reasons. But let's start with this question. What do you think you learned in all your co-op placements, in all the things you did at school, high school, etc., that helped you be successful in it? Let's start with the initial role, the technology solutions professional role, then moving on to the other ones. What did you learn? And then as you were going through each of those roles, what helped you decide, okay, did you just sort of fall into each of the roles, or did you decide to yourself, okay, it's time for me to challenge myself? And was it a conscious decision as you moved into each of those roles?
Yeah, that's a good question. I honestly think probably the number one thing I learned from co-ops from school was communication, because I would see things break down even as a co-op student, and think this could easily be resolved if people could just clearly communicate the issues that they're having. And they would constantly see issues come up by people not seeming to understand one another or not providing information at the right time. And I think learning how to communicate and learning the different styles that people appreciate and adapting to that, I think that was super important. Like, if you're trying to convey the results of a project, how do you show that to somebody in a way that's going to be impactful? And how do you explain that? And to be honest, that is something you learn in engineering, because it's a very applied degree. And a lot of the courses you take, you do a project, then you have to explain the project. You have to write a report on it. You have to present the report. And you have to kind of be able to show what you did and make people understand why it was the right way to approach it, and your thought process. And I think that skill set was super important. So the second thing I would say that was a big learning is just the ability to problem solve. I think one thing that I will say that I liked about engineering is that there's really an emphasis on making sure you're solving the right problem before you start solving it. So I think there is a tendency
Mm,
when you hear something to immediately start solutioning, but and that is honestly my default as well, but learning in engineering, I think there if some percentage that a prof threw out, and I'm going to get it wrong, but it was something like spend 80% of your time defining the problem and 20% solving it. Because when you jump into solutions too quickly, you're going to end up solving something that maybe wasn't the right problem. And I
yeah.
think just knowing, like, in a lot of what we did in our degree, we did a lot of open-ended projects where you define the problem and then you have to figure out how to solve it. And I think you kind of look at what tools do I have, and then where do I get the information that I don't have? Do I ask someone? What can I get online? Do I go to a prof? Do I go to a classmate? And kind of leaning on the resources that you have. And I think what engineering taught me is to be resourceful. Like, I was very lucky in my class. We were super collaborative. Everyone would always help each other with assignments, any classwork, anything that we had, really. And kind of learning how to lean on those people, even though I like to work independently, realizing how much time do you spend kind of, banging your head against the wall before you ask for help. I think you need to try something first, but then you need to ask for help, because you're going to be able to work faster. And so the other thing is, a lot of people say, oh, I hate group projects, I hate group work. Definitely there's frustrations with that,
Mm,
and I do think school is different from the workplace. I than when it comes to collaboration. But honestly, you can get a lot more done when you have a good group and you can work effectively together. It comes down to setting expectations and communicating. And I think if you can align on if you have shared expectations and goals, then it's a lot easier. It gets more difficult if some people don't care and some people do.
yeah.
But we're seeing, having the experience to work with really motivated people in school before I even got to the workplace and see what kind of things we can build was really it was really exciting. And also I like the kind of cheesy quote, but it's like, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Like, you can accomplish way more working in a group. And it's true. It's true. And I say this as somebody who kind of likes to be in control and do things and do it my way. But at the same time, you have to recognize where you need to step back and where it's more effective to kind of collaborate with people and not try to take on everything yourself. And that holds true in my current role today. I need to get to be good at kind of passing along tasks that fall outside of the scope in my role, which I'm not always good at, but I try.
Yeah. Oh, well, we all try. It's always a challenge.
Yeah.
Well, as I've learned later in my career, stakeholder management, I keep getting told all the time. Stakeholder management. Okay, so the second part of that question was when you moved into your other roles, and then even when you moved, well let's stick with the first couple of roles at Microsoft. What were you thinking about career-wise? Was it a conscious choice about moving roles, or was it sort of, I just fell into the role and it was interesting? What were you thinking early on? And I know it's a big question.
Yeah.
I don't think any of us were thinking that much when we first started. It was just like, this is cool.
Yeah. I was trying to figure out what people were talking about in meetings, to be honest. I was like, I just sitting there being like, yeah. And then I'd ask my colleague after, what were they talking about? And trying to learn. Anyways, like, it was honestly, the first 6 months were rough. And I joined at an interesting time where we were still just Azure, which, you know, for folks, like, that's a lot of different services covering so many different areas, from apps, infrastructure, data, AI, and Azure was starting to get really big. And so we broke out into kind of solution areas shortly after I joined. And I'm not sure where I was going to get placed, but I was very much not quiet about the fact that I wanted to be on the data team. Given my experiences before, I felt like it was the best alignment to my skill set, even though I had so much to learn. I actually could relate to some of the things. Like, you know, I remember learning about Azure machine learning, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I actually understand what this is. Meanwhile, I'm looking at trying to take the infrastructure exam, and I have no clue what they're talking about with virtual networks. Like, took me months to understand, to be honest, what a virtual machine was. And I was like, I want to work in data. Like, I want to be in data. And I just kept advocating that. That is what I'm interested in. This was my skill set when I came in, and I think that's where I want to stay. And they hired a manager, and I ended up getting moved to his team. And that was awesome. He was a great, fantastic manager. And so I learned a lot. Also had some great mentors kind of allowing me to shadow and ask very probably stupid questions all the time without making me feel stupid. So I was really lucky to have that and have them give me opportunities to take little pieces of client projects and then, you know, have me learn and then demo it, but make sure it was something that I had worked on so I could comfortably demo it. And I think that was really helpful. And then actually the change in role, the first one wasn't actually a change. It was just a reorg. One day came to work and they told me, you're a cloud solution architect now. So I actually didn't change roles. But I had been very much eyeing going to the AI team because I was so interested in machine learning and being more AI focused. And I was on the data platform team. And I kind of saw AI as more greenfield and maybe where someone younger, you know, who doesn't have years of experience as a DBA, which I found a lot of my customers had, and I had a hard time relating to that. Maybe that was a better place for me to be. And I talked a lot to my manager. At the same time, I was trying to convince him to move me out of Toronto because I didn't like living in Toronto. And thankfully, we made the move out west eventually. And I lived in Calgary. That was just because I wanted a different experience. And thankfully, my manager was nice enough to help me kind of make that transition. And so that was actually, though, that kind of was just a personal choice. But at the same time, it was really interesting because I didn't realize how different customers would be in different regions. So working with customers in Toronto versus Calgary was very different. And I think was actually a really good learning experience to work, you know, in a smaller team in different industries and also different levels of maturity, which was, again, super, super impactful for my experiences that I had. I think moving to Calgary after being in Toronto really helped with my confidence because, to be honest, the customers in Toronto were very mature because they have AWS, they have Google representatives coming and pitching all these things. They're getting the best talent because that's where everyone wants to go in the tech world in Canada is Toronto. Whereas in Calgary, you have a lot of motivated people, but not necessarily the same resourcing as you have in Toronto. And I think, honestly, I think it's changing, but I did notice a difference. And, you know, I felt like I could make a bigger impact in Calgary because of that. And so it was easier to jump into those conversations. And yeah, our titles changed, our roles shifted a little bit, but it was effectively the same thing. So that was like, yeah, that was just a good old Microsoft reorg, that first transition.
Okay, cool. So
yeah.
So it sounds a lot like what was driving you was what you had a passion for, which was data, and you really wanted to do things that were data. And then the move was more, hey, I just want a bit of a different scene. But the real cool component of that was you actually got to see a different type of customer or a different audience, and that gave you an experience as well, which is true. Like even in Australia, if you go to different cities, depending on how, I guess that's probably the right word, mature the customer is, or how deep into newer technology a customer is, you'll have different levels of skill, not skill sets, but of understanding of different technologies. Some people will be uber deep in, on premises because they've still got data centers, whereas some will be very deep in cloud, depending on where their journey is. So, all right, so cool. We've identified all those things. All right, then you joined the super awesome, amazing. What was the Azure Technical Trainer team back then, and met some pretty cool people, I might say myself. So, what made you want to just transition into training people and helping people? And obviously, we understand why you're at the data space. What made you want to do that?
Yeah, I think two main things drove that. Is one, my favorite part of being in the roles that I had before was doing workshops. I loved getting up, presenting, and then helping people through labs. Like I really liked the interaction, and I also felt like it was a better use of my skill set. Like to be honest, I don't love being kind of like in the weeds doing very like low level things. I like kind of higher level, sharing concepts, helping people learn things, and then learn how to use it and apply it. And so I had the opportunity to do that in my role, and I liked it. And then I was kind of looking for a change. It was with the TS or then CSA role was my first job out of school, and I kind of fell into it, and I thought I want to kind of direct my own path a little bit more. And so, I have this skill set now in data. I like teaching workshops. And if I'm being completely honest, and I don't hide this when I share my experiences either, I felt like I had this label on my head, which was you're a new graduate. I mean, people still think I am today, which I guess is a compliment, but I still feel like that's like a challenge being in tech and looking like you're, 25 years old, coming into meetings. And so I was like, I think even internally too, and it's not that, anything super bad happened. I just felt like people, it was hard to gain credibility because you're so young. And I clearly didn't have the experience of my colleagues. And I think there's something to be said for that. In the technical sales world, having experience does matter a bit. You can learn, but it is very hard to kind of you're an advisor and you're giving recommendations. So as like a 23-year-old, when I first took the role, like that's really tough to just walk into that role and be a trusted advisor when you have no background in that field. So building that, I thought, you know what, let me try something different. I love teaching. I can talk literally all day and they're just going to pay me to talk. Like that sounds like a pretty good gig. I think I heard about the role from a friend of mine that I had met through the Aspire program, Mary Jo. So shout out to her. Yeah. And I remember, talking to her about it. And she was like, oh, I'm in Sweden right now, like traveling. I'm like, that's so cool. And you get to travel and see the world, which probably would have been the rural US for me because I don't live in Europe. But still, I thought the idea of traveling would be really cool for a bit. But then unfortunately, as you know, I took the role and the pandemic hit. So all the dreams, I know, all the dreams of traveling just went out the door. And unfortunately, I think that role was just not what I was expecting because of that. But of course, that's no one's fault. Like I didn't know that. Microsoft didn't know that. Nobody knew that was coming and how long it would last. And so that is why I only lasted in the role for a year. Like I didn't I really wanted the in-person piece. And, I thought, obviously it was temporary to some extent, but then it kept getting extended. And I was like, I can't keep talking to a black screen on Teams because people often wouldn't turn on their cameras in multi-day workshops. But I will say I learned a lot from that. Again, learned to be more patient. But honestly, it was really interesting because I think in sales scenarios, customers will often pretend they know something when they don't. Maybe to impress you, or because you're from Microsoft, or
Yeah.
to their boss is on the call, right? And they don't want to look bad in front of their boss. So sometimes it's hard to know, like, did they actually understand what I said, or are they just saying that so we keep going? Whereas in training, people come in and they're honest. You're under the premise, this is, you can ask whatever you want. I'm not gonna judge you. This is safe to ask. Like, even if you think it's the stupidest question in the world, I'm not gonna make fun of you for asking it. Like, and I think because I was still very early in my career, I could really resonate with some of the questions people are asking. And I think, it kind of made me realize too, like, people don't necessarily always understand everything. They're just pretending to. And when you go into this training environment, I'm like, people are willing to be more honest and ask for help. And so I thought that was really interesting. And I also liked just, being able to kind of break down concepts and explain stuff and explain how the Microsoft stack fits together, because that was always a confusing piece, especially I taught data engineering and data science courses. And then, it was rewarding in the sense too, where people are happy after that I learned something, then they pass their certification exam and they email you, oh, thank you so much for your help. So like, that was, I think, really nice. But again, doing it over Teams all the time, I was like, I just couldn't do it, to be honest.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what led me to leave.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then from Microsoft, you joined a startup. I think it was Densitas. And then you had a few other roles after that. So just take people through, and I know this answer because you and I chatted about this when you were thinking about it, and then you moved over. But what inspired you, or what made you want to then join and that particular startup as well?
Yeah. So I think it looks kind of confusing, I think, on the surface level if you just looked at my LinkedIn. But one thing I should mention is I love school. And I'll come back to this. I love school, but I wanted to do a master's degree. I know it's weird. I don't know, because it's horrible, but I still want to go back. It's like, I don't know what that's about, but I really wanted to do a master's degree, but I was so burnt out after my undergrad, just so exhausted from it. And I knew there's no way I'm going back into school. And also, I took out a bunch of student loans to pay for school. So I needed to make some money, I wanted to be in a better financial position before I went back. And so that was always in the back of my mind of, maybe I should do my master's. What should I do it in? That was always in the back of my mind this whole time. I didn't want to start a master's degree in the pandemic because, again, really didn't want to do remote learning. So I'm like, doesn't seem like a good time to start a degree. But one thing I really wanted to do and was trying to do at Microsoft before I switched to the training team was work in the healthcare space. And I found it difficult to break into. Like, in Canada, we don't have a specific, like, a huge team that focuses just on healthcare. Most of us are cross-industry. So right now I actually cover some healthcare accounts, which is awesome. But I don't only cover healthcare because there's not that many people in Canada. So we cover multi-industry. But I found trouble kind of getting into those sorts of roles. So I thought, you know what, let me get that experience somewhere else. Let's try working. I also wanted to work at a small company, because you hear all this stuff of fast-paced startups and, you hear all these things. And I'm like, let me go vet this for myself. Like, what is it like outside of Microsoft? I also, honestly, I left too out of the fear of, if I don't leave soon, I'm going to stay here forever and I'm never going to experience anything else, because it is very easy to stay. And I saw some colleagues being like, oh, I wish when I was young I had tried this or taken this risk. And I was like, oh, I got to do this now. Like, there was a bit of fear of, if I don't do it now, I'll never do it, which isn't necessarily true, but that was my thought process. And so through connections, I ended up finding, this company in Halifax, and kind of carved out a role working with the founder, and they kind of carved out a role for me. That was what I wanted to do. And so I think when I look back, I think the role itself turned out not to really be what I was hoping it would be, or what we had intended. And it was just kind of like, it took a different path than we expected, And I was basically, once the sale was made, we sort of had a mammography software that we sold to radiology departments in the US and Canada primarily, and a few places in Europe. And so basically, whenever a sale was made, I would come in, I was the customer success person. So what do we do post-sale? Figuring that out, figuring out how to train customers. So again, the training piece really came into play there, and that was my favorite part of that role. But there was this fear in my head that I was losing all my technical skills. Now, again, I will say, like, I felt like, I don't normally go down this path, but being a woman in tech, I felt like, oh no, I need to be a good woman in tech and be more technical. And so I honestly, again, I was like, I'm too early in my career to lose to lose all my technical skills. Now, again, this is a bit of ego. This is a bit of just, being afraid of stereotypes. And I was scared that I was getting too far out of the realm of being technical. So I kind of thought, all right, if this isn't what I want to do, and I've always wanted to do a master's, let's do a master's. So I started putting that in motion, started looking at different programs, eventually landed on biomedical engineering based on my background in sports and, what I thought I could get into, and ended up, very long story short, at the University of Ottawa. I liked the lab. I liked the supervisor. He basically said he was giving me kind of free reign to work on whatever I wanted, which is very uncommon in academia. So that was very attractive to me. Is okay, cool. I get to come here and define my own project, and you're going to give me some funding to do that. Like, that's amazing. Because typically you have a specific project that's already carved out for you. So I loved that idea. And so that's what I did. So moved to Ottawa and was doing that for, it took me just over 2 years. Again, it was a great experience. I did it on human movement biomechanics, so really focused on open source markerless motion capture. Really, it was interesting, but at the same time, it proved to me I don't want to just be a hands-on keyboard technical person, because I ended up just writing code like every single day for a year, and I'm like, I'm kind of bad at this. Like I wasn't that good at actually developing the code. I didn't super enjoy that part. I liked writing afterwards, but I did not love the actual development process. And then on the side, this whole time I was doing freelance work that was related to Microsoft. Like I was doing training, not a ton, but I was doing some training, just some like advisory sessions. And then I worked part-time for a Microsoft partner based here in Ottawa. And I'm like, everything's calling me back to Microsoft. I can't get it out of my life. So maybe that means, it's the way that I've, been able to make money on the side during my master's. Yeah. And then an opportunity came up to come back, and I wasn't really super interested in continuing in academia. And so I thought, you know what? After everything that I've learned and reflected on, I think having more experience, being more confident in my abilities too, coming back to the technical specialist role. It's kind of funny because I literally came back to the same role. There you go. In a different city though, again. That's my third city with Microsoft. I think it was kind of full circle, but also, even I had the same onboarding buddy has to put up with me. He has to put up with me again for round 2. But anyways, I think I needed the time to kind of reflect on what I was trying to prioritize, I guess. And I like this role because you get to see a lot of different issues in a lot of different industries, and you get to help customers. Like my favorite part of the role is I do feel like we get to help customers. They've been told, you got to implement this in 2 months or whatever. And they're like, I don't know what this technology is. Sometimes they say that they come with that kind of question, and you try to help get them on the right track and help explain things to them. So in that way, it's not all that different from being a trainer.
Yeah. Yeah. And it sounds like some of the similar traits. It's interesting. I'll dissect a little bit of what you said. So, and for those listening, and I'm assuming Heather you were obviously able to continue to do training and work on the side because you were a Microsoft certified trainer, and you probably still are an MCT. And you can, for those listening, if that's something that interests you, then you can do that with a number of different providers to become trainers, and you can freelance and do things like that. It's a nice way just to make a bit of money on the side if you've got that skill set and you can teach. So it's actually cool you're able to still do that, especially while you were teaching. I was going to ask you being someone who I joined Microsoft probably midway through my career is what I'd say. I'm slightly older man now. It's not that old.
You're not that old, George.
But I'm not that old. I've been in the industry a long time now, though. But I remember thinking to myself, geez, I would have loved to have joined Microsoft when, straight out of university, and it would have been cool. And that's the question I was going to ask you. But how did that impact you when you think to yourself, I want life experience. I want to experience being a customer, like what Microsoft says, or other big companies. For anyone listening, if they've got similar scenarios where you've joined other big companies, but it sounds like you sort of that's part of why you left to see what I guess the rest of the world was like, and you got that itch out of you.
It is kind of weird too, because in a way, like I found my first year at Microsoft extremely difficult, and I don't think that's uncommon. Just you come into a role where you literally don't have the background. Like it's not, I had a manager say to me once, "Oh, it's imposter syndrome." I'm like, it's literally not imposter syndrome. I actually don't know any of this. I'm not saying I can't learn it, but I can't learn it fast enough. I can't learn 10 years of experience in 6 months. It is not possible. And I just felt like I couldn't learn quickly enough and get the experience quickly enough. So that first year was honestly like very tumultuous, and I thought about leaving at times just because I'm like, there's got to be something like easier than doing this. But at the same time, like I do think Microsoft has a good culture, but I think like there's like a Microsoft way of doing things, and I think that is just how my brain works. Like when I left and went to the startup, I noticed I still referred to Microsoft by saying we for like 6 months. And I'm like, I don't work there anymore. I need to stop saying we. Like, it's just a company. But you do kind of, like, there's something about the culture and everything that kind of, this sounds like very culty, but it's like.
I know that you say it.
But, like, and I feel like there's a certain kind of, like, camaraderie between people when you go there. Like, everyone's very friendly and open. Like, one thing that I do appreciate about Microsoft, you can email literally anyone and they'll answer you.
That's
like
true.
It's very, unless they're on vacation or something, it's people are always willing to help you out, and just having that kind of culture, I think goes a really long way. But it is weird in a way. Like I feel like most of my experience, even though I left for a bit, is still at Microsoft. Like it's, I can't really speak to it because I don't know what it's like to start somewhere else. It is kind of weird because you start, and at first, we're all looking at each other, all us new hires. This is surreal. Like, I can't believe we work at Microsoft. And then you're kind of like, you kind of just get used to it after a while, and it doesn't feel surreal anymore. It is, at the end of the day, it's a job, it's a company, it's a very public facing company. And I think it's a good place to be. But it's intimidating to come into as a young person without real experience in that area. And they're just like, and they know you don't have experience. They expect you to learn. They want you to learn, but it is still intimidating because there's so much to learn.
Yeah, there is. There always is. There still is.
Yeah, it still is. But at least now I have some foundation to speak to, which you do not have. At least I did not have when I first came out of school. And
So, okay, let me go through a couple more things with you. Now, I think you've sort of answered this question already. This is a question I ask everybody. I personally have what I call my philosophy or values that I follow with my career, and they've guided me. I think, and I always forget them. Which is terrible, right?
One thing you want to remember.
Yeah, true. One is I love helping people, so I always sort of have followed education for that reason. Another is I need to have there needs to be some sort of passion in the area. So I need to have some sort of interest in that particular area. And the third, it slips my mind right now. But the point being that these are things that, actually I should say maybe the fourth is always, it's got to work with my family.
That's fair.
But so these are, the other one is it has to have purpose. So I don't want to just do a job.
Yeah.
I want a job that has some impact and the helping and the interest in those areas. And a good example is I definitely had a crossroads where I could either go down the path that I did, or I could have gone and stuck in the technology that I'd not stuck in it, but stayed in the technology that I'd worked in. But I chose this path because I did the Azure Ranger role for a while, and I went down that path. So from what I'm hearing from you, data was definitely a big part of that. It has to be data, but what do you think is your values, your philosophy in general when it comes to your career? So data is definitely one of them. I think that's what I've heard you say. And experience might be another potentially, but what do you think?
Yeah, it's funny. I actually just read a book about this. So this is a good way to navigate. It was about navigating making changes. And I think to be honest, I think like I don't have necessarily a set of values. I'm trying to define what they are because I think naturally they come out in some way, even if you're not putting a name to them. So I'm trying to think of like, how do I actually put a name to these things? I thought of it more as priorities. You know, like when I first joined Microsoft, the priority was to get a job. I was like, I need a job and I need money. So honestly, like, but one of my priorities and one of the reasons I came back is, to be honest, is financial reasons. Like Microsoft does compensate employees well in comparison to other what else was available in industry. That was one of the reasons that I came back, because I do, is the compensation. But I also want to feel like I'm doing something that adds value. Not, and I do feel like we are trying to, of course, we have incentives to, we're at the end of the day, we're in a sales organization. But I'd like to think, I and our sales team does not position things that the customer doesn't need. And a lot of the time it's like I'm working primarily in public sector now. And I do like getting to engage with public sector because some of the projects that I'm involved in will hopefully directly impact citizens in Canada and be able to save money, make a difference, provide better services, faster services. And so I do think that's pretty cool to work on those kinds of projects. But the other thing is it does have to fit around my life. So I don't know what to call it that, but like the flexibility, like as you mentioned earlier, like I competed in track and field for a long time. And I'm now coaching with the university and the local club here in Ottawa. And that's really important to me. And if my job prevents me from doing that, then I need to find a new job, because to be honest, like that's such an important thing that I want to be part of. I love coaching. I love I'm still training a bit as well. And I get like a lot of excitement from that. And, at one point I thought I can make this my job, but then I'm like, I've kind of learned you can have hobbies, you can have a job. They don't always have to mix. It's okay. But I do appreciate having the flexibility to be able to do that. Like we have volunteer days at Microsoft, and I was able to use some of those because I had to travel to Windsor, Ontario, which is a very boring city. No offense to anyone who's from Windsor. I think you would agree with me. Like
it's going to get cancelled from anyone from Windsor, Ontario. We love you, Windsor, Ontario.
No, we don't. Sorry. Right. It's so far from Ottawa too, but our Ontario championships and nationals were there, and I had to go there twice. And so I also have the flexibility of remote work, and so was able to work a bit, take volunteer days while the athletes that I was coaching were competing, because it was on a weekday a couple of times. That was really useful. And, I cleared it with my manager. I had another meet I had to go to in Montreal, and which is closer, but my manager was very accommodating with that. And I do feel like that was part of the reason I came back too, of knowing if I go back, I'm going to be able to continue doing these things, because I know that, first of all, it's at night, so it's like outside of working hours, and then the times when I do need to be there, like we have flexible programs to allow us to do those sorts of things. Okay. So I'd say, so what is that? It's doing something that I like, doing something that I feel is providing value in some way to society, and doing something the money part, and then also having the flexibility to do what I want in my free time. Yeah.
That's cool, mate. And I think your career so far is very indicative of what a lot of careers are like, where you sort of there's a visual. I'll try and put it on the video that someone shared with me a few years ago. It shows like one of those paths that go up and down, and it's true. Like you'll have different parts of your career where, similar to you, no, I'm not going to work. I'm going to work on the side, but then get a degree, or maybe you just as one of my colleagues that I used to work with at Australia Post. Maybe I'll lay my ladder flat for a while, because I just need to let my brain not explode with new information for a bit. And it's true, and it does come in bits and pieces, in different parts of your life, for sure. So it sounds like you've gone through a bit of a marathon of a career so far, mate, which is pretty cool.
I know, and I'm not even 10 years into my career yet, but I do feel like I remember someone someone said to me, I was telling you, like, we had an intern in the summer, and I think he said to me, that sounds really chaotic. And then there was like, I was talking to 2 interns, and I was like, that's kind of rude. And he's like, sorry, I didn't mean it like to sound bad, but it just sounds like you've done a lot. But I do feel like it gives me good experiences, and not that I'm saying, like, I will say too, if someone's giving you advice, you know, you don't have to listen to it. I will say that if someone asks me for advice, I'm like, first of all, you don't have to listen to anything I say. You are not entitled to do anything I do. This is just my perspective, and you can take whatever you want away from it. But I do feel like it gives me a better view of like pros and cons of different things, and at least I can provide, you know, more objective information, what it's like to job search in different capacities, what it's like to go back to academia when you're you know, not that I was way older than everyone, but I was older than most people, and that was kind of hard at first too, because it makes you almost feel like a failure when, you know, the other people your age have PhDs and everyone's like, oh, you're not a PhD student. There's like a little bit of that in not in my lab, but like in general in academia. It's like, if you're 30 and you don't have a PhD, then what are you even doing here? Like, there's a little bit of that attitude I found. Not that no one said that directly, but there's definitely a hierarchy. That existed. And so I think, you know, having those experiences does help me. One, I will never wonder what if I always thought about a master's, and I thought, I know if I don't do this and I'm, you know, 10, 15 years down the road, I'm going to regret it, because I'm going to think, what if I actually loved it and I pursued academia, became a prof or something, which I know is not easy to do. But what if, you know, because I was too scared to try, what if that kind of ruined the path that I wanted to pursue? And I just don't want to have a career where I'm wondering, what if, you know, if there's something I want to do, I want to make it happen, instead of, you know, sitting here and wondering one day if I should have made a different decision. Because I don't feel that right now. I'm not like looking back, and I don't have to worry about, oh, what if I did a master's? Well, I know what that's like now. Whether it's good or bad, it's done.
All right, so let's end with a couple of quick ones. So give me the highlight of your career, the low light of your career so far, and then I'll ask you one final question.
That's really hard.
I thought the highlight was when you were in the trainer team.
I should have said that. That was an obvious one. Sorry.
My terrible dad joke for the day.
That is the highlight. This is actually really hard. I don't know. The highlight of my career. I'm trying to think.
You don't have to answer. So you've done.
No, I feel like there's got to be something. Like, I maybe I can get around it and just say something like, I guess the highlight is, it's not really one highlight, but it's like doing the things that I wanted to do, like doing, you know, maybe it's honestly, I didn't feel that proud of myself when I got an undergrad degree, because I was like, everyone gets an undergrad degree. And I know that's also not true, but also I just don't feel, you know, I don't usually take time to be like, yay, I'm so great. You know, I don't think like that. But I did actually feel a sense of accomplishment when I finished my master's degree. I think mostly because the master's is thesis based, and it's very self-driven. Like, no one is making me do this. I can get a job. I don't need to do this. I can get a job. And many times I thought, you know, maybe I should just drop out. But I'm glad that I did it, just because it was, you know, not just something to tick the box, but I learned a lot. And I think that pushing through when you actually don't need to do something, but you're trying to achieve a goal, I think that was the first experience in my career where I thought, there's a million other things I could be doing that would pay me better and wouldn't make me work as much. Why am I doing this to myself? I think pushing through that and kind of actually, you know, finishing out, seeing it through, I think that was a big moment for me personally. And then also kind of still going back into work in tech and not really, to be honest, like, I don't feel, it was a bit hard to catch up in the first couple months, but I don't really feel like I missed too much. I did in some ways, you know, there's lots of new tech, but at the same time, I felt like I was able to jump back into the role pretty quickly. So I think that was also, you know, a lot of people say when you go to academia, you know, now you're irrelevant. I don't think that's true. And I think just not listening, this is a lot of highlights, not listening to stereotypes,
that's good.
And just doing what you want. Yeah. Because it's not true. I think you learn a lot in school, time management being a huge one that can apply to any role. And I think that has helped me a lot. So yeah, I guess it's finishing my master's degree, I think, is my highlight.
That's a cool highlight. Any low light you can think of?
Low light was probably the first year at Microsoft of just feeling incompetent all the time. And yeah, like I don't know if there was really any specific moment. But for example, a lot of the sellers I couldn't really engage and work with them because I didn't have the skill set. And I think just kind of sitting there and being like, part of this is just time, and realizing that there was nothing I could do to accelerate my learning. I couldn't study 24 hours a day to learn something, and some of it was going to come through experience. I think that was honestly really tough to get over. Yeah, that was tough. And also, I will say, when I moved to Calgary and they switched us all to CSAs and they did a reorg, I ended up getting a new manager, which I wasn't expecting because I was on a national team, and this manager had helped me move to Calgary. I would say that was actually a pretty sad day for me because I really liked him and he helped me a lot in my career at a time when I was very impressionable and needed a lot of help. So shout out to Kevin. I was pretty sad when I found out he wasn't going to be my manager anymore. I didn't know, like, it had nothing to do with who the new manager was. It was just, someone who had a huge impact on my career, and someone who I thought was going to continue to be my manager. And then it was all just like, reorg. So I think sometimes the reorgs are tough when you have someone who's been super supportive and made a huge difference in your life, and then it's changed. So I would say that was a low light, to be honest.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like when you have a really good manager who has a really great impact on you, and they're not your manager anymore. This is what you always hear people say. They leave managers, not necessarily organizations or jobs, because when you don't have a great manager, it's not the best experience. But when you do have a great manager, it's the opposite. It's just great going to work. It's great getting support. So I can understand that. Yeah, totally.
And just being so young, and he didn't treat me like I was, different than everybody else though, but what helped me when I needed it, kind of thing. And I felt like he's my manager for about a year and a half, and I feel like I learned so much in that time and really kind of started being able to do the role instead of just sitting there and shadowing people. And I think like a huge part of that was thanks to him.
Yeah, that's a good point. All right, last question for you. All right, I think we went talking for well over an hour now.
I can talk forever, sorry.
We could talk for another couple of hours. Okay, so anyone listening, watching, who's got a similar life experience to you, whether they're in Canada or another country, if you could go back to yourself or to that person about to start uni or at uni and looking for jobs, what advice could you give them, or what would you tell them to think about when it comes to their career?
I think one thing is do something that you want to do is number one. And if you feel like you really want to do something and a bunch of people are saying, oh, you shouldn't, it's not like a stable career path or something, I think you should do it anyway. If you really want to do something, find a way to do it. That would be my number one advice. There was tons of people, honestly, who told me there's no point in getting a master's degree. But to me, the point of doing a master's degree was to have the experience of doing a master's degree. That is the point. I wanted the experience. I wanted to do it. It doesn't matter if it's not the best decision for my career. Maybe it to me, it was, because that's what I wanted to do. So I would say don't let too many people's opinions shape what your career is. Like, try to choose something that you actually want to do and go pursue that, even if it doesn't line up with what you studied. And you think, sometimes it's like, oh, I'm not working as an industrial engineer. Did I waste that time? No, because you learned something during that time and you can apply that. And there's lots of transferable skills, whether you studied engineering, whether it's some sort of science, whether it was an arts degree, you definitely learned something that is transferable. And so pursue what you actually want to do, because otherwise you're going to end up doing something that you hate, and that's not fun. So don't do that.
Very wise words, mate. Very wise words. Really good point. All right, thank you so much for joining us on the show. I'm looking forward to, maybe we'll do this in another 5 years. We'll see where you've gone in 5 years' time.
Yeah, that'll be interesting to look back on this.
It will be. And for everyone else, thank you for listening, and we'll catch you at the next one.
Thank you for watching this episode of Sympa Says. If you would like to see more videos, please like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. Or follow if you are listening on a podcast platform to support the channel and join our community.